So some of you may have seen this presentation. A lot of it's the same of what I've done before. I've recorded a presentation similar to this before, and I've also presented it before, but we're doing it again just to make sure that everybody understands feline leukemia. Things change about this disease. I think, I don't know, like every year I seem to get more and more information about it and things start changing about it. So it's always good. I'm always trying to stay on top of the newest developments with feline leukemia, and I will definitely share them with everybody as soon as I hear them. So that's why we're going through it again. And I will just start talking about it. So what is feline leukemia? And it's going to be abbreviated in this presentation as FELV, which I'm sure many of you know what that disease is. It affects the immune system, so it decreases their ability to fight disease. Many cats will have a shortened lifespan because of this, because they're more susceptible to other diseases and to certain types of cancer. So that's what makes this disease so devastating for cats. And it mostly affects young cats, at least the devastating portion of the disease. And we'll kind of go more into that. But the cats less than about 1.5 years of age, if they catch feline leukemia, they're more likely to get the form that's going to give them a shorter lifespan. The way that cats get feline leukemia is it's a very social disease. So it's a close contact, more of a grooming, social interaction type of disease, whereas FIV, which is the other immune deficiency disease that we have, is more of a fighting disease, so more of a deep bite type of disease. So feline leukemia is more of a, I guess you'd call it a friendly disease. They get it by usually by saliva, so grooming each other, sharing food and water dishes, sharing the litter box, things like that. They can get it through bite wounds like FIV, but it's more common to be more of a social interaction between cats. I keep having people in the waiting room, so I'm just trying to make sure everybody's getting admitted here. Kittens can be infected in the womb or through the milk from the mother. And blood transfusions and contaminated needles are other ways that this disease could be spread from cat to cat. Maternal antibodies, for those of you who know about FIV, we always say that in kittens less than 6 months of age, we can't confirm that FIV, if they do test positive for FIV, that they actually have FIV. And that's the way the test is created. But for FELV, in this case, the maternal antibodies don't interfere with the testing like they do for FIV. So when we see a positive kitten, it's a positive kitten. It definitely is positive for FELV. Cats develop, and I mentioned this before, younger cats have more of a tendency to get FELV than older cats because they develop an age-related immunity to the FELV. Unless they're immunocompromised in some way, meaning they have a decreased immune system, a lot of cats that are exposed to FELV when they're older can fight the disease and they never develop a problem with it.
Diane,
Yes.
Renee asked if mom is positive, what are the odds of the kitten getting it?
Oh, very high, because it is spread in the milk and it can be transferred through the uterus. So it's very high that the kittens will have FELV. And unfortunately, being young, they're much more likely to have what we're going to go through right now, the progressive form, which is the form that would cause a shorter lifespan. Great question. So we're looking at, this is the stages of FELV. So we start with exposure to the virus through the saliva from another cat. And there's 3 different ways this can go. It can go to abortive, which means that their immune system fights the disease, it's done, they don't have any problem with it. So they can actually fight this disease and never develop feline leukemia or any feline leukemia symptoms. The second way it could go is what's called regressive. And what that does is the cat system, it gets in the cat system, they fight it, but they don't quite fully fight it enough. And then it goes dormant in their bone marrow. So the immune response contains that virus, but it doesn't completely eliminate it. And so it just stays there in their system. These cats can normally live a long lifespan, and often a normal lifespan, sorry. But at some point in their life, they very likely will develop some disease that's associated with feline leukemia. The disease can at some point also reactivate and become an active disease. And then the third form that we see most commonly in young cats is the progressive form of FELV. And this is the disease that is so devastating for our kitties because they will definitely have a shorter lifespan. And we're talking less than 3 years. And those of you who know our kitties that are FELV positive kitties that have been there, Oak and Yarrow, and can't think the other two names right now, the kitties that were there, one of them is left, Oak. And unfortunately, that they all had progressive feline leukemia, and they've all succumbed to different forms of the disease and different problems along with it. So it does definitely shorter their survival time. It's nice to have a kitty in the background making all sorts of noise and jumping all over the room. That makes it so much easier to make this presentation, but you guys understand, so that's good.
A couple more questions, Diane.
Yeah.
Are regressive and progressive equally contagious? And does regressive transmit as regressive?
So progressive and regressive, let me go back to that slide. This is the same virus. So the same virus infects every cat. It's just what their immune system does with the virus. So their immune system either can completely fight it, and that's called abortive. They can partially fight it, and that's regressive. Or they can not be able to fight it at all, and that's progressive. So it just depends on what their body does with the system, with the virus. Regressive cats, the virus will go into their bone marrow, and they won't be actively shedding the virus, which is what would cause them to be able to spread it from one cat to another. But we never know when that can become reactivated. And that's the problem, where you don't want to place these regressive cats in a home with cats that are feline leukemia negative. Because at some point this cat could get stressed and the disease could reactivate, and they may have an active virus in their saliva that could spread it to the other cats. So it still means that we want to have them in a home where they're not, where they're either with other feline leukemia cats or alone in the home, so that they don't spread the disease. Does that answer the question?
Part of it. Then
Okay.
the next question from Natalie is, would abortive cats like Dad need to be only cats, or can they safely live with other cats?
They can safely live with other cats.
Okay.
And often we don't even know about these cats. The reason we picked up on Dad is we did the test in-house. We got a positive result. We sent it out to our lab, and I'll go through the process for this to get confirmation of that. And both of those tests at the lab came up negative. So the cat was exposed to feline leukemia and fought the disease, is basically what that means. Yeah, so can be safely placed with any other cats.
And will regressive always reactivate at some point?
No, not necessarily. Often, as they get older and they develop other diseases, their body gets stressed. Yes, often it can reactivate. It doesn't always have to, though. I had a cat who was regressive. We didn't know that at the time but I knew the cat had been exposed to feline leukemia as a kitten, never developed disease, got to age 17, developed a tooth infection, and died within 2 weeks of feline leukemia. So It was just the stress of being older and then developing that infection and couldn't get over that last hump. So it's little things that you don't really realize that can stress out their system and then bring that back to the surface.
And Renee asked, do regressive cats have to be adopted alone or with other positive cats?
Yes, either alone or with other positive cats. They shouldn't go to a home with feline leukemia negative cats.
And is the viral load different in regressive versus progressive forms?
The viral load, they're not actively shedding the virus, so there's not active virus necessarily being shed from their body. So maybe I'm misinterpreting this, but maybe what you're asking is, did they get a smaller dose of the virus and that's why they went to regressive? Is that what the question is asking?
Roshan, do you want to unmute and clarify your question?
No, I was just wondering, like, do you actually measure the viral load of FELV? And then if you are able to measure it, is it different in regressive versus progressive forms? And does that have an impact on transmission?
It's an interesting question. I would have to look a little bit more at the PCR test to see exactly what they are measuring, because we're going to talk about that in a little bit. That's one of our confirmation tests that we run. And I'm not exactly sure what they're measuring, but they do give us a quantitative value that we're looking at. And so the higher quantity in that, and I'm not sure exactly what that is measuring. I think it's a portion of the DNA or RNA, I'd have to look at it, of the virus that it's measuring. So I would assume that it's measuring that it is a higher level in the progressive than it is in regressive. So when that value on the PCR test is higher, it's a progressive cat. Whereas if it's lower, it is regressive, but I'm just not exactly sure what that value is measuring. I'm sorry. Any other questions?
That's it.
Okay, I will go on. Great questions, everybody. So this is the test that we run in our hospital. This is called a SNAP test. It takes 3 drops of blood and a solution that we mix it with, and it will detect an active viremia. The test we use is called the IDEX SNAP test, and research in the market has shown that it is the most accurate test out there on the market. That's why we use it. It's a little bit more expensive than other tests, but we want to make sure we get the most accurate results. So what I mean by active viremia is that this cat is actively shedding FELV virus. If the cat was exposed to another cat with FELV in the last 30 days, this test may show up negative, but the cat is actually, their body is in the process of fighting that virus, and the body's not yet sure whether it's going to live in that body, or if the cat's going to be able to fight that infection and it's going to be abortive. So we can only say when we're doing these tests that at the time of the test, this cat was negative. We have no idea if the next 30 to 60 days, if this cat is going to become positive because they were exposed to that virus, and we just aren't detecting that test as being positive at this point. So that's where the testing gets a little tricky, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. So you can see here what we are looking for. So the picture on the left is a negative result. There's one blue dot. That dot indicates is just the test control dot that shows up and says you did the test correctly and you ran it correctly. When we get a positive result, there's the dot at the top and then a dot to the right of that, just right and below. And that's a positive result for FELV. And at that point, if we get a positive test result, we draw some more blood from this cat and we send it to our reference lab that runs 2 tests. They run what's called an antigen test, and they run a PCR test. And these are very specific tests. And the PCR, like I explained just a few minutes ago, has a quantity to it. And that's how we can tell the difference between a progressive versus a regressive cat. So when we did DAD, this SNAP test showed up positive, like is on the picture on the right, but the PCR and the antigen test showed up negative. There are sometimes these tests in-house can be wrong, so they could be a false positive, or it can be that we're in the process of fighting the disease and the body had already gotten to the point where it fought the virus, so abortive. So the great news, because we've had a lot of requests for this, is that February 1st, we are again going to testing all of our cats for feline leukemia. And that's great that we have that assurance, but I do want to mention a few things here, is that the incidence of feline leukemia is very low in the environment. 1 to 3% of cats have feline leukemia. So it's not a real prominent disease. It can be devastating when the cat has it, but luckily there's not a lot of cats out there that do have feline leukemia. And as we just talked about, any cat that tests negative, we can only say they're negative at the time they were tested. And since a lot of our cats come from unsure environments, especially if they were a stray that it was brought to us, or they came from an owner that may have let them outside. We don't always know what kind of exposure they've had to being bitten by another cat, or possibly even if they've been in another shelter, perhaps that shelter just went ahead and put them in a room with several other cats, and we don't know what the exposure level of that cat is. So we can say they're negative if we do a SNAP test in-house, but we want to make sure that people are understanding they were negative at that time. So we don't want our adopters developing a false sense of security that this cat will always be negative. And we'll talk a little bit more about what the American Association of Feline Practitioners recommends for all cats in their testing. So educating owners about why it may be important to talk with their veterinarian about retesting that cat is a good idea. So regressive cats, another thing that we should point out, regressive cats may not test positive. Like I said, it's a complicated disease. So testing is not always a sure method that this cat is absolutely feline leukemia negative. So I have here some talking points for our ACs. We recommended this when we stopped feline leukemia testing for a little while, and we still recommended that all cats that will be placed with other cats be tested for feline leukemia before they're exposed to each other. So if they have other cats at home that haven't been tested, it would be a good idea to test those cats before they bring home another cat. We're not going to not adopt our cat out, but we can make those recommendations to them. Feline leukemia, as we talked about before, explaining to the owners how it is transmitted is important. And that's that social, casual interactions like grooming, sharing litter boxes, food and water dishes, those kind of things. The virus doesn't live outside of the cat very long, but it can live long enough that if one cat drank out of a water dish that was feline leukemia positive, and a minute later another cat came by and drank out of that water dish, it could potentially transmit. It's going to be much more likely it would transmit from mutual grooming or something like that. Feline leukemia vaccination is not 100% and won't totally protect exposed cats. So just because they might have a cat at home that is, vaccinated, it doesn't mean it would protect them if they were to adopt a feline leukemia positive cat. And since any test, we just talked about this, just like the COVID tests that we're taking, it only tests for that moment in time. So cats that come from an unknown background, we recommend adoption counselors recommend owners talk to their veterinarian about whether retesting is a good idea or not for that cat. We are not going to do retesting at cat adoption team. So we're not going to schedule appointments for them to get retested if they want that, but they should talk to their veterinarian to see if that's even necessary. Have their veterinarian go over the history and see if they feel like that's a good idea or not. House cleaning and caregiving basics. I'm just going to go over a little bit of that. Of course, any cat that goes in group housing, and we're going to be feline leukemia testing everybody now. So any cat that goes into group housing should be feline leukemia tested. We don't want to expose a cat to feline leukemia unnecessarily. FELV positive cats are going to be housed separately from FELV negative cats, just like we recommend in people's homes. But we can house FELV positive cats with other FELV positive cats. And of course, some cats are very social, and that's a good thing. If we have more than one FELV positive cat, we'd love for them to be together. If we have kittens that are FELV positive, we'd love for people to adopt them together so they have a friend. No special cleaning procedures or protective equipment is needed whenever you're handling or dealing with a feline leukemia positive cat. But we do double turn kennels. And the reason for that is just if there is any sort of biological matter, since feline leukemia can be spread in any sort of bodily fluid, we just want to make really certain that none of that material is in that kennel before we put another cat in there. So we just want to, double cleaning is just an assurance for us to make sure that we got up everything that was in that kennel.
Diane, are we still recommending that people visit first or wear PPE when visiting the FELV cats?
The only reason we've recommended that is just so that we're not, a lot of our cats have a little bit of sneezing, have a little bit of URI symptoms that are mild, and it's very normal for some of our cats to have that. It's not a problem. But if someone were to visit them and then go in and visit one of our feline leukemia cats, they could easily spread that disease. So we do want to make sure that they are, it'd be great if they could visit them first so that we're not exposing other cats or, taking something from one cat to our feline leukemia cats. It's not because we're worried about catching something from those feline leukemia cats. We're not worried about you carrying feline leukemia to another cat. We're not worried about any of those things. It's more of we don't want to get them sick. So having them wash their hands. If they were holding another cat, I'd probably recommend you just put on a jacket if they want to hold one of the FELV positive cats. We're just trying to keep them healthy. I don't want to discourage people from going in and visiting them. It's just a matter of trying to keep us from spreading disease to these guys.
There's a couple more questions.
Okay.
Sharon Hall is asking, do all kennels get double turned?
Not to my knowledge. You might know.
Only the FELV or
Right.
If we have ringworm or something else like that that's really contagious, those kennels are.
URI or any of those. Yeah, a lot of times with if we are suspecting like Calisi virus with a URI, we'll have them double turn it. So yeah, there are some diseases that we make sure that we double turn the kennels.
And then Maya has a question. If the body aborts FELV once, are they less likely to catch FELV again, or are they even immune at that point?
Usually the cats that have an abortive reaction are the older cats. And if they've been able to pass the virus once, they will probably pass it again, and we will probably never know. So we probably don't catch them in those phases where they've been exposed to it, and we test them and we happen to get into that, one test is positive and the other ones turn out being negative. So we'll probably never know their exposure level. As far as we know, they develop some sort of immunity. I don't think that there's any sort of positive, anything proven to that. I would assume that a cat could be, abort the infection, but if they were immunocompromised in some way, maybe they had cancer, or maybe they have some sort of organ issue and then get exposed again to feline leukemia, it's very possible they could then, their immune system wouldn't be able to fight it. Any other questions?
That's it so far.
Okay. All right. So keeping FELV positive cats healthy when we adopt these kitties out, it's important to talk to the owner about a low stress environment and housing. We know from our shelter environment that when cats get stressed, they tend to get sick. So we want to make sure that this is going to be a low stress household for these kitties. If the feline leukemia positive cat gets ill in any way, they really should go to their veterinarian as soon as possible. Because we do jump a little bit faster on treating diseases for these kitties. We don't want it to become serious. And that's one of the feline leukemia positive kittens that we had developed a simple kitty cold, and then it went into pneumonia on 2 of them. So it's something where it's common, disease that any other kitty could pass. Feline leukemia kitties can't pass as easily. So it is important to jump on these things really quickly when they do have an illness. Regular preventative care is important. So getting regular exams at their veterinarian, vaccinations as recommended, parasite control, just to keep these kitties healthy. So feline leukemia positive adoptions is a special process, just like we have for FIV. So we make sure that we give them all the information that they need to give this kitty the right home. Adoption counselors will have special training in order to adopt out feline leukemia positive kitties. As I said before, we only place them with other feline leukemia positive cats or as single cats. And based on whether they're progressive or regressive, we need to set a realistic expectation for their lifespan. And we have in their Shelter Buddy file, we will place what's called an indemnity. And in that indemnity, it will tell the person looking at that whether they are regressive or progressive, and it gives some information about that disease and what we can expect later on with this disease. The one for progressive will say, we expect this cat to live 3 years or less. And regressive often can live a normal lifespan. We talked about that before. Feline leukemia vaccine is not 100% effective, but it is recommended if they have an indoor-outdoor kitty, which our kitties are not adopted that way, but if they do have an indoor-outdoor kitty, it is recommended to be up to date on FELV vaccine because they're going to get more exposure to the virus than an indoor kitty. And vaccination is not sufficient protection for living with a feline leukemia positive cat. So American Association of Feline Practitioners, their most current recommendations for testing cats for feline leukemia, all cats periodically based on risk. So if you have a totally indoor cat, which our kitties should be, if they're totally indoors, their risk is pretty much nil, but we don't know if perhaps they had a regressive infection that they were exposed to a long time ago and it's gone in the bone marrow and now suddenly it's reactivated. So it is recommended to periodically test cats, especially if they're showing signs of disease that may indicate feline leukemia. Anytime you have a new cat joining a group setting, it's recommended to test for feline leukemia after any sort of exposure in 30 to 60 days after that exposure. Sick cats, regardless of their previous status. Again, this is recommendations. Often, if we have a really sick cat, when I was in general practice, it was just kind of part of the blood work that you ran. So you would run some basic blood work to look at their organ systems, but you would usually add on a feline leukemia and feline AIDS test to that because it just makes sense. If we have a sick kitty, it's very possible that it could have these diseases, and it would change the way that we treat the disease. Anytime prior to a feline leukemia vaccination, they should be tested. And if they're exposed, they're living with a positive kitty, or if they're an outdoor kitty, it's just recommended to do it on a yearly basis. Okay, and you guys get to see my 2 kitties. Those are 2 of my 3 kitties. Norman is my newest one, and he's on the left. And Zeke is a alumni from Cat Adoption Team, and he's on the right. So, questions? I can tell you a little bit about too. I didn't touch on this enough, but like I said, we are starting our feline leukemia testing February 1st. Mary, I believe right now is contacting fosters. And if there are cats in foster that are not planned to go through surgery, she's contacting them and finding times for them to come in and have those cats tested. So she's working on that, I believe, this week. So if you haven't heard from her and you know that your foster cat is not coming in to get to have spay or neuter surgery, then certainly you can reach out to Mary and find a time for you to get your foster kitty in to get it tested. When cats come in for admissions, if they're not going to be having spay or neuter surgery, that's when we're going to do the test, is at admissions. If they are going to have spay or neuter surgery, then we're going to wait until they're under anesthesia for the spay neuter surgery. It's just easier to get the blood at that time. So that's when we're going to be doing the testing. Another thing I just wanted to touch on for foster kitties, please realize the test is a point in time test. So if we do the test and we say the cat's negative, it's not, if they come from an unsure background, we cannot guarantee that's a total negative and 30 days from now they won't test positive. So think about that when you're exposing them to your own kitties at home. I don't want to discourage you from those interactions, because I know that the social interactions are important, but also realize that there is some risk involved in that as well. Looks like Renee has her hand raised.
Yeah, I was wondering, in regards to transports that come in, not all other shelters or not all other places that we get our cats test. So obviously we'll be testing those cats. And if one tests positive, is the whole transport going to be treated like it would be ringworm? We kind of go into not panic mode, but like, okay, what other cats was this cat really exposed to? Since this is such a social disease, like how is that going to be handled? I guess that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, if they're on a transport, if they're in separate kennels, there really is no chance that they were exposed to each other. So I would not be concerned, unlike ringworm, which is spread by the hair spores, the spores on the hairs themselves. So it could potentially go from one kennel to the next in a transport. Feline leukemia really can't. So they really need that close social contact for that to be spread.
Okay,
I would not be concerned if one tested positive. I would not be concerned about the rest of the cats on that transport unless they were in the same kennel together.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Diane, I'm not sure if you touched on it. My internet's been kicking me out every once in a while. Did you mention the fosters that kittens will be typically tested at altar?
Yes.
So they need to be cautious when integrating into their homes.
Right. Yeah. So we will, of course, test if it's a litter with a mom. We will test the mom before she goes out to foster. But if they are kittens all on their own, they haven't been altered yet, and they go out to foster, we will not test those kittens. We're not planning on testing those kittens until they come back for alter. So I would caution people before integrating that into your household.
Thank you.
Renee, did you have another question?
No, I didn't realize I needed to put my hand down.
Okay. And I can't see all your faces. Maybe I should take it off. So I'm not sure if let me see if I can see you better. So just speak up if you have a question, because I can't necessarily see your hand raised.
Diane, this is Patty Reed. I have a question.
Okay.
I love fostering, but I also am often super nervous about cats transmitting between each other. how worried are you when you have your resident cats, and your resident cats have been vaccinated, but the vaccine's not 100%, and you have a cat that's tested negative, but you don't know because it's not 30 days? How anxious do you get about letting them touch noses and see each other and spend time playing? Or
Right. If we're talking about if my resident cats are adult cats that are, 2 or 3 years old and otherwise healthy, I wouldn't be that concerned. And this cat and the foster cat tested negative. Because again, this is a disease usually of the young. And so I wouldn't be overly concerned about my adult cats interacting with this cat.
got it. Cool. So it's not 100%, but not so bad that you should like never let them interact.
Right. Now, if we're talking, my adult cats with kittens, I'd probably love for them to be tested before I had them interact. So I would probably keep them in a foster room. I don't know that I would let them interact with my adult cats. But again, the likelihood of my adult cats getting the disease is pretty low.
Got it. Thank you.
Other questions?
I just have a question in regards to adoption counseling. Is there a process in place for those of us who have been FELV tested to notify those who are doing the scheduling that we are FELV tested or like passed to do those adoption sessions? Because there's about 5 of us who can do them because we've done the test or the process before. So is there something in place to move forward with that?
There is not really at this point, Juanita. We're just getting back into that, but we definitely will work with you all to make sure that we're just up to speed on the new changes, and then you'll be good to go.
Would it be possible to add a blurb about all of this in the foster manual for people who do like virtual meet and greets for potential adopters, so we have something readily available to look at to maybe answer questions, or at least read the verbiage that CAT offers?
As far as the adoption counseling points, is that what you're saying?
Well, I mean, I as a foster, I do a lot of virtual meet and greets. And in the past, people would come over, and when some adopters would ask about FELV testing. Is there a place that as a foster can go to make sure we're giving the correct verbiage to those potential adopters and not missaying something that might go not against, but not what CAT is trying to teach?
I'm sure Mary's updating the information that's in the foster manual with the new protocols. So we'll make sure that happens, Renee. And
Okay.
also for adoption counselors, we have updated the slide so that it'll have the new information in the adoption presentation, and it'll be ready to go on February 1st.
We also will be putting in our admissions record, so the notes that go in at admissions when you enter in the physical exam and things like that, we will have something on the bottom of that. Right now it says something about we don't test all cats for feline leukemia, but we recommend it. We're going to change that to, even though this cat was tested and tested negative for feline leukemia, please talk to your veterinarian about whether you should retest at a later time based on exposure. So something to that effect. If that's not the wording, I should have had the wording out here, but so we'll have another line in there about, talk to your veterinarian about whether retesting might be a good idea, basically. Any other questions? Okay. Feel
I
free.
guess I
have,
Oh, another question.
so I had a question about like ACAs showing cats. So will there be a proper time or email sent out to inform ACAs that there's like new protocol in discussing FELV or FELV testing when showing the cats?
This information will go out to everybody after this meeting. So it'll be in written form and it will go out to all of the volunteers.
And then Lauren, did you have a question?
Yeah, I guess it's just reaffirming what I've already been doing and what I gathered from you tonight. I learned so much. But as I mostly do kittens, I won't know. And although my cats are vaccinated, it doesn't mean that it's protected necessarily.
Mhm.
And so what I've been doing so far, just because I've been anxious about the whole thing, is not letting, sometimes I let them see each other, but I haven't let them actually interact. So the seeing each other should mostly be okay still, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. And, you know, for the most part, I guess another thing I can think of is that most resident cats aren't going to be going up and starting to groom the kitten as soon as they walk out of the the safe room either. So if you keep the water dishes separate, water and food dishes separate, the litter boxes separate, that sort of thing, you know, this could be fine. I just don't want you to expose your resident cats to anything that could harm them in any way. So to be on the cautious side, you really shouldn't have any interaction. Looking at each other is not going to spread the disease. It is a saliva-based or body function-based disease. So yeah, just you know, have some caution with it, and letting your cats look at each other, that's fine. That shouldn't be a problem. Any other questions? So if any other questions arise, be sure to let me know. I realize it can be, sometimes I don't have all the answers and sometimes it can sound really confusing, and I hope it doesn't sound like I'm contradicting myself, but this is a complicated disease. And like I said, things change all the time in this disease. Just the part about progressive, regressive, and abortive, all of that verbiage has changed in the last, I think, 2 years. So it's something that's constantly evolving as we find out more about the disease. It's, you know, there's unfortunately no firm and hard facts about a lot of it, unfortunately, but we're still learning and we're still changing. And when I get more information, I will pass it on. So but be sure to ask if you have questions and I'll give you the best answer I have at the time. All right.
Thank you so much, Dr. Brown. This was great, great information. We really appreciate it.
You bet. Anytime. Thanks, everybody.
Have a good night.
Bye.